Have you ever stopped to think about why salt, something so common on our tables, plays such a crucial role in biblical stories? In a world where so many things become obsolete, why does this simple element remain so relevant throughout the centuries? The truth is that salt goes far beyond being a seasoning. It is essential not only for life but also for faith. And what many people overlook is that, in the biblical context, salt carries a spiritual power that can transform lives. Does that seem like an exaggeration? Perhaps, but believe me, when you discover what salt truly represents in the scriptures, you will understand why it is one of the most underestimated tools of spirituality. If you are seeking answers that can change your perspective on something so mundane, prepare yourself for a revelation that may transform your way of seeing history and, perhaps, even your faith. When we talk about salt in the context of biblical stories, we are not just referring to a simple culinary seasoning, but to a true spiritual weapon, charged with divine purpose. Since ancient times, salt has been used as a symbol of purity and authority, something that transcends the material world. Imagine salt as one of the tools that God gave us, just like fire and water, to establish His will on earth. It is no coincidence that Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth." He was highlighting the importance of this element in our lives, a means by which faith manifests in a tangible way. The video emphasizes that salt, in addition to being a symbol, is a powerful weapon in the hands of those who have faith. It is not just a condiment, but an instrument of spiritual warfare, with the ability to alter realities, break barriers, and transform situations. In many moments in the scriptures, we see salt being used symbolically to mark moments of great importance, such as the establishment of covenants and the consecration of offerings. It is as if God, by granting us salt, was giving us a key to access spiritual dimensions that would otherwise be beyond our reach. The power of salt goes beyond its physical properties. In the spiritual realm, it carries an authority that is given directly by God. Just as fire can purify and water can renew, salt has the power to protect and seal. The Bible is full of examples where salt was used with purpose and intention, always directed by divine will. For example, in the book of Numbers, the Lord speaks of a covenant of salt, symbolizing something that is eternal, unbreakable, and sacred. This same authority was delegated to believers, so that, with faith, they can use it as an instrument of protection and blessing. Curiously, we often forget the spiritual value of salt and underestimate it, relegating it only to the role of seasoning. However, when we start to see salt through the lens of faith, we understand that it is one of the ways God empowers us to manifest His authority on earth. Imagine, for example, a person who decides to consecrate their home with salt, praying and asking for divine protection over that environment. This simple act, when done with faith, carries extraordinary power, capable of driving away all negativity and establishing an atmosphere of peace and spiritual security. And it is precisely at this point that the video invites us to reflect. If salt was given to us as a divine gift, with a clear and defined purpose, why don't we use it more frequently in our spiritual life? By understanding the true meaning of salt and its importance in biblical stories, we begin to realize that it is much more than a physical element. It is an extension of God's authority, a powerful weapon to be used in our faith journey. Within the biblical stories, salt is presented with three spiritual attributes that make it a unique element in the dynamics of faith: purification, creation of covenants, and cursing. Each of these attributes carries a profound meaning that goes beyond mere practical use. Firstly, salt is recognized as a purifying agent. Just as fire refines gold, salt can purify what is impure, bringing renewal and holiness wherever it is applied. When used correctly and with faith, it has the power to purify not only the physical but also the spiritual. In addition to purification, salt plays a crucial role in the creation of covenants. The scriptures mention several times the covenant of salt, a pact that, being sealed with this element, is seen as something lasting and unbreakable. This makes us reflect on the seriousness with which God regards the covenants and commitments made with His people. Therefore, salt is not just a symbol but a tangible representation of God's faithfulness. When we make a covenant before Him, using salt can be a way of reaffirming our commitment and the seriousness with which we should view our promises. The third spiritual attribute of salt, and perhaps the most intriguing, is its power to curse. Yes, the same salt that purifies and seals covenants can also be used as an instrument of cursing when employed wrongly or for perverse purposes. In the Bible, we see examples of cities being salted after being destroyed, as a sign of eternal curse, a land where nothing could grow anymore. This use of salt as a curse reminds us of the seriousness of our choices and the spiritual consequences they can bring. However, the central point that the video addresses is the power of salt to break curses and bring blessings. When used with faith and according to God's will, salt not only purifies and seals covenants but also undoes evil works, releases blessings, and restores what has been corrupted. Imagine a situation where you feel that your life or environment is under some form of spiritual oppression. The use of salt, accompanied by prayer and faith, can be the key to breaking that situation and bringing the peace you seek. Just as in biblical times, today it can be used to reverse curses and open doors to new blessings. Therefore, The video not only teaches us about the spiritual attributes of salt but also challenges us to use it with wisdom and discernment. Recognizing the power that this element carries is fundamental to applying it effectively in our lives. And it is in this recognition that we prepare to understand even more deeply how salt, despite being so simple, can become one of the most powerful tools in our journey of faith. By addressing the issue of salt in the context of biblical stories, the video raises an important concern: the distortion the enemy makes of its use. This distortion, unfortunately, has led many Christians to fear an element that, in reality, was ordained by God as a powerful tool for spiritual warfare. Salt, in its original purpose, is a divine gift, a weapon that, when used correctly, can protect, purify, and strengthen. However, the enemy, knowing the power of salt, has tried to corrupt this understanding, creating confusion and fear among the faithful. This fear is often fueled by superstitions and misunderstandings that distort the true nature of salt. Instead of being seen as a tool given by God, salt is sometimes treated as a mystical object, wrapped in practices that have no biblical foundation. The video warns us about this strategy of the enemy, which aims to disarm Christians, distancing them from one of the most effective weapons that God has placed at their disposal. Salt, far from being a talisman, is a concrete manifestation of divine authority, an extension of the power that God grants to His children. It is essential that Christians recover the correct understanding of the use of salt, without giving in to fear or confusion. Instead of avoiding or underestimating it, we must embrace salt for what it truly is, a tool given by God to fight against the forces of evil. This reappropriation of salt as a spiritual weapon begins with knowledge and faith. When we understand the role of salt in the Scriptures and the purpose that God assigned to it, we are empowered to use it effectively and powerfully in our spiritual lives. The video emphasizes the importance of exposing these distortions and restoring the truth about salt. One practical way to do this is by studying the Scriptures, seeking to understand how salt was used by God and His people throughout history. By deepening our knowledge, we not only dismantle the lies of the enemy but also equip ourselves to use salt in a way that glorifies God and strengthens our faith. Imagine applying this knowledge when consecrating your home or praying for protection, knowing that salt is one of the spiritual weapons ordained by God. Therefore, the video makes a call to Christians not to fall into the traps of the enemy but to reclaim this powerful tool. Fear and confusion only have power over us when we are unaware of the truth. But by recovering the true meaning of salt, Christians can use it with confidence and authority, knowing that they are using a divine instrument intended to bring protection, blessings, and victory in spiritual battles. To understand the true power of salt in biblical stories, it is essential to look at the Scriptures and how they record the use of this element over time. From Genesis to Chronicles, salt plays a significant role, both in moments of blessing and in acts of cursing. In Genesis, we see salt present in the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, where Lot's wife turns into a pillar of salt, a lasting symbol of disobedience and the severity of divine judgment. This event reminds us of the sacred nature of salt and how it can be a marker of God's will. In Leviticus, salt is mentioned in relation to offerings made to the Lord. God commands that all grain offerings be seasoned with salt so that God's covenant with His people will always be remembered. This use of salt as an integral part of offerings is not just symbolic but carries profound spiritual significance. It represents purity, incorruptibility, and the permanence of God's covenant with His people. Therefore, salt becomes a constant reminder of God's faithfulness and His willingness to keep His promises to those who are faithful. In Chronicles, salt appears again, this time as part of an enduring covenant. God makes a covenant of salt with David, promising that his descendants will rule forever. This covenant, marked by salt, is a symbol of the eternal and unbreakable nature of God's promises. When God uses salt in this context, He emphasizes the seriousness and longevity of His commitment. Therefore, the covenant of salt represents something that is not only sacred but also inviolable, destined to last forever. The exploration of these stories in the video serves as a powerful reminder that salt, far from being a mere seasoning, is deeply embedded in the spiritual history of humanity. Each time salt appears in the Bible, it carries with it a divine purpose, whether to bless, protect, purify, or even curse. The correct understanding of these stories helps us see salt for what it truly is, a tangible representation of God's power and His covenant with His people. This understanding of salt's role in biblical stories can have a profound impact on how we approach our faith today. By recognizing the importance of salt in these narratives, we are invited to use it with greater intention in our spiritual practices. Whether it is to consecrate our homes, seal a prayer, or break a curse, salt remains as powerful today as it was in biblical times. But for it to be effective, it must be used with knowledge, faith, and a correct understanding of its purpose. Therefore, by studying these biblical stories and reflecting on the spiritual significance of salt, we can be better equipped to use this element in our own lives. Salt, as a divine tool, is a gift that God has given us to strengthen our faith, protect us from evil, and remind us of His eternal covenant. By reclaiming this understanding, We prepare to use salt not just as a seasoning but as a powerful weapon in our spiritual journey.